At Verneuil, the 8,000 English were hugely outnumbered. And coming straight at them was a cavalry force of 2,000 arrow-proof knights.
When the archer fire was so ineffective, arrows would have not only bounced off the armour of the cavalry, but bounced off the horse's armour as well, not breaking the momentum of the charge at all. And then crash, just knocking aside the line of archers, a bit like a wave, just blasting aside an old wooden jetty. And then the shock as the archers are trampled over, killed, dispersed, and then this force of cavalry moving on, gaining speed all the time, and does exactly the same thing to the main English position.
Line upon line of English soldiers were annihilated in this medieval blitzkrieg.
And at this moment, it looks like the game is up, the battle is lost. It's a catastrophic defeat for the English, and this is the rumour that now spreads in the surrounding countryside. The English army has been wiped out on the field at Verneuil.
The Italian mercenaries tore through the English ranks and pillaged the baggage train. English forces were scattered, confused, and in total disarray. But the battle wasn't over yet. The French had victory in the bag, but the French had reckoned without John of Bedford. He was Henry V's younger brother, and he was regent of France, governing it for the infant King Henry VI of England. This was his land, his domain, and he would have victory here or die in the doing. He summoned his commanders, he gathered his men, and he told them, "Look, you're dead. Your baggage, your possessions mean nothing. All that matters now is your personal honor. All that matters now is your fame and glory. Follow me, I will lead you. We will win this day." And with that, Bedford turned and led his knights into a bitter hand-to-hand struggle. On the battlefield of Verneuil, the English archers had been defeated by the charge of heavily armoured, arrow-proof cavalry. But the English rallied under John of Bedford to engage in desperate hand-to-hand combat with the main body of the French knights, a grinding, battering maul. An eyewitness, Jean de Warrin, was in the front line.
The blood of the dead spread upon the ground. The two armies fought with all their might, and no one could tell who was winning.
In this fierce and bloody warfare, the men in armour were not wholly invulnerable. There were weapons designed specifically to defeat armour. And in the vaults of the Burrell collection in Glasgow, there are some rare original pieces from the time of the 100 Years' War. They are looked after by curator Tobias Capwell.
Just look at this poleaxe. That is absolute beauty.
This is really one of the classic late medieval knightly weapons, and the late medieval part of it's quite important because these don't really appear until the development of full plate armor, and you can see that they're designed specifically to counter that sort of defense. You have the beak on one side for crushing or puncturing armor. You have a top spike which has a very stiff rectangular cross-section, and a blade for more general purposes. But this is another type of 15th century concussion weapon. It's a flanged mace dating from about 1450.
It's fantastically elegant, isn't it?
Yes, yes. It's not particularly large or heavy or clunky. It's a small, fast, elegant weapon, as you say. But what they do is they focus the energy onto a very small area and conducting the force of a blow straight through a particular area of the opponent's body.
But of course the other way of defeating armour is having hit them on the head when the knight's down to actually deliver the coup de grace. What they called at the time a ballock dagger.
Yes. It's a classic medieval weapon designed for defeating armor in an entirely different way. Notice, unlike a normal dagger or a normal knife, it doesn't actually have any cutting edges at all. It has a very rectangular cross-section. It's essentially a spike on a stick, and it's purely for punching through armor or punching through the gaps in armor.
Whether or not an armour is actually penetrated by a weapon is not the only consideration. The body can still suffer immense injuries from what is known as blunt trauma. That is, the shock waves going through the armour to the body itself. It can cause hemorrhaging, it can cause fracture of bones, concussion, unconsciousness. We've set our breastplate up on this gelatin block. I am now going to hit it with the business end of a poleaxe, and we will be able to see the shock waves as they go through. So our breastplate remains structurally intact. But the man inside may have been seriously injured by violent shock waves running through his torso. The poleaxe was a high-status weapon of choice for knights fighting on foot, and it was especially favoured by Bedford. So how did John of Bedford fight with his poleaxe? Well, we have a clue in a 15th century manuscript, Le Jeu de l'Hache. It's anonymously written, but it tells us in quite detail how this weapon should be used. One of the first things it tells us is a lot of the fighting is done with the Q of the weapon. That's the tail end of the weapon, which has a spike, not with the axe end. In fact, the manuscript tells us take a number of jabs at the enemy's face and the feet to discomfort your enemy before you start. Another useful tactic that the manuscript recommends is to use your poleaxe as a lever. So, Stuart, if you take a guard, come at me any way you like. I can do that, drive it through here. Now I've got tremendous levering power, and I can get him to the ground and finish him off. Other fight manuals also show the axe being held behind the back here. But the main advantage of this position is it's an invitation. If I'm like that, Stuart, does that suggest anything to you? Does it invite you to attack?
Yeah, you look undefended and certainly more vulnerable to, from this strong guard position, to cut up to your armpit.
Why don't you try that? I can step back out of the way, bring my axe down, disabling his arm, get in, hook him round the neck, bring him forward, and there's the killer blow as he falls. It really is a most robust and vigorous weapon, ideal for the determined grit with which John of Bedford went into battle that day. Bedford forced the French back towards Verneuil. And now they found themselves trapped, forced up against the steep defensive ditches surrounding the town. Here they were massacred. The bodies of heavily armoured men were rolled down these slopes, their bodies piling high as the slaughter continued, the dead and the half-dead. The bodies of the living were either drowned or crushed by the sheer weight of armour and men on top of them. No quarter was given. This was murder. The Italian cavalry returned from their pillaging to find the battle over. Despite his opponent's superior numbers and their cutting-edge armour, Bedford's men had won the day. No armour is proof against an unbreakable will. And at Verneuil, Bedford's fighting prowess had prevailed against overwhelming odds. His enemy was vanquished, and his king, Henry VI of England, was now also crowned King of France, the first and only monarch to rule both kingdoms. Medieval weapons were a triumph of craftsmanship and ingenuity. But a weapon's potential could only be realized in the hands of a skilled and courageous warrior. Mastering the art of arms took years of dedicated training. It was at the centre of a martial culture that dominated medieval Britain. A culture that carved out our history on the battlefield and paid for it with the lives of the archer, the knight, and the foot soldier.